Hello everybody. Welcome. This is Nico from Unicorn Riot. Good morning out there. This is day, I think, 9 of Inside the Courtroom Testimonies and day 21 of the total overall trial for Derek Chauvin, facing 3 counts, 2 murder charges, second and third degree, and 1 manslaughter charge in the death of George Floyd. We are expected to start court very shortly. You see the time on there, 9:15 a.m., which is just about right now. We're here and we're going to continue to obviously provide you this live stream. Thank you all for joining on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and thank you all for being respectful in the chats.
Would have been frustrating,
Brian,
as well as thank you all for supporting us. And so continue to follow our work at unicornriot.ninja is our website. If you want to know more about any of this case, we have some updates. We have some people already chiming in where they're calling from. And we see the live connection up on the top right. That is a live connection from the court. The audio is on. So once court comes in, you will hear them, and I'll promptly stop talking. Looks like that might be happening very soon here. But we see people chiming in from Medina,
the jury. Mr. Nelson,
Eugene,
you wish to make a
Oregon.
record?
Here we go.
Yes, I'll have you up there.
Yes, Your Honor. Just very briefly, for purposes of, it's my understanding that the state is intending to start calling its medical experts this morning. All of the experts ultimately rely on some degree on Dr. Baker's autopsy and his findings and that information. I don't have a problem calling Mr. Baker or Dr. Baker out of order for purposes of foundation. However, I just wanted to make sure that the record reflects that the state does intend to call Dr. Baker.
So in other words, your lack of objection to any foundation is based on the state's representation that they will call Dr. Baker?
Correct, Your Honor.
Is that correct, Mr. Blackwell? The state is going to call Dr. Baker?
Yes, Your Honor, we intend to do so tomorrow.
All right, thank you. All right, anything else for the record before we bring back the jury? All right, can we get my computer and we'll get the jury.
A brief update from what you just saw. It seemed like the defense was going to object to Dr. Baker being on the stand, and the state, it sounded like they said they were going to call him tomorrow. So we do expect other medical experts to be on the stand today. We do expect troubling accounts of things, so beware and mindful.
Good morning, Your Honor, counsel, ladies and gentlemen. We'll call our first witness this morning, Dr. Martin Tobin.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Seat, please. Doctor, if you wouldn't mind removing your mask for your testimony.
Yep.
And also, to make sure the microphone is properly placed, we're going to have you state your full name, spelling each of your names.
Martin Tobin, MartinTobin.
Mr. Blackwell.
Good morning, Dr. Tobin.
Good morning, Mr. Blackwell.
Would you tell us what's your current employment?
I am a physician in pulmonary and critical care medicine
And whereabouts?
in Chicago at Heinz VA Hospital and Loyola University Medical School.
And is Heinz VA Hospital a large facility?
It used to be the largest VA hospital in the country. I think it's now been superseded by one or two others.
And you specialize in pulmonology?
I specialize in pulmonology and in critical care medicine.
Would you tell the jury what pulmonology is?
Pulmonology is the study of the lungs. It deals with all diseases that affect the respiratory system. So the lungs, the chest wall.
So what are the various elements, components of the respiratory system other than the lungs and chest wall?
I mean, the respiratory system begins at the nose and the mouth. It goes down through the back of the throat, down through the windpipe, out through the bronchial tubes, and then down at the bottom, down to the alveolar air sacs. These are the small grape-like structures at the bottom where all the gas exchange takes place, where oxygen gets in and carbon dioxide is removed.
So this is the system for getting oxygen into the body.
Correct. That is the prime purpose to get oxygen in.
Now at Heinz Hospital, do you work in the intensive care unit?
Yes, I work in the medical intensive care unit.
And that's considered critical care?
Same as critical care. These words all have the same meaning.
Is critical care different from emergency medicine?
Yes, it's very different than emergency medicine. Emergency medicine is kind of the front door of the hospital. That is a triage area where you separate out where people need to go, whereas the critical care is where you take the very, very sickest people.
What kind of patients do you see in the ICU?
In the ICU, probably more than half of them are patients who are requiring mechanical ventilation, so they're on a respirator to help them with their breathing. Then another substantial number will not be on a respirator, but their primary problems relates to their lungs, so that might make up 70% or so. And then the remaining patients will have drug overdoses, alcohol withdrawal, diabetic coma, sepsis, things like that.
Do you only see the patients in need of respiratory care?
No, once they come into the ICU, they're our patients. I'm the primary care physician for everybody who comes into the ICU.
And how long have you been a physician, sir?
I've been a physician for 3 months short of 46 years, so over 45 years.
And where did you go to school?
I went to medical school in Dublin, Ireland, and I took my degree there.
Not that anybody noticed the accent, but but are you from Dublin?
No, I'm not from Dublin. I'm from a small village called Freshford in County Kilkenny in rural Ireland.
What degrees do you hold?
I'm sorry?
What degrees?
The degree I hold is the MB degree, which is the Irish equivalent of the American MD, and then subsequently I got an MD through research.
Are you currently licensed?
Yes, I'm licensed in the state of Illinois. In the past, I was licensed in Ireland and England and a number of US states, but I've let them all lapse because the only place I'm practicing is in Illinois.
Are you board certified?
Yes, I'm board certified in internal medicine, pulmonary medicine, and critical care medicine.
So you still are actively caring for patients?
Yes, I was taking care of patients in the ICU last week, and on Monday I go straight back into the ICU again.
How long have you held positions at Loyola University School of Medicine?
I've been at Loyola and Hines for 32 years almost.
Before going to Loyola, were you practicing medicine somewhere else?
Yep, I spent 7 years at the University of Texas at Houston.
Did you also set up a sleep clinic in Houston?
Yes, I did. That would have been in the early 80s, so I set up one of the very first sleep labs in the United States for evaluating patients with obstructive sleep apnea.
So how do sleep disorders fit within your expertise?
Because this is related again to breathing and the problems with sleep, particularly people who snore. And the people who snore during the nighttime, they occlude their upper airway and they can totally stop breathing 500, 600 times a night, and during that time the level of oxygen in their blood will go very low. And the basic problem in sleep apnea is because the soft palate, I mean, the roof of your mouth is your hard palate, and then just if you look in the mirror, it's that little piece that's hanging down at the back, and that's your soft palate and uvula, and that jams in against the back of your throat and it gets occluded 500 times a night in somebody who has sleep apnea.
And does that kind of research or science or medicine relate to your work in this case?
Yes, it's extremely pertinent to the case of Mr. Floyd, because obviously in sleep apnea the problem is at the back of the throat, and as we will see in Mr. Floyd, the central problem of where the obstruction is occurring is in the hypopharynx, which is again at the back of the throat. So it has an awful lot of overlap to patients with sleep apnea.
We'll come back to the hypopharynx in a little bit. Are you also engaged in medical research?
I'm sorry?
Are you also engaged in medical research?
Yes, I do. I've been doing medical research since the early 80s, since about 1981.
What kind of research have you been doing?
All of my research is related basically to breathing. So it is kind of looking at breathing in patients with lung disease, people who have lung disease who walk in the door to the clinic, and also patients who are in the ICU, and particularly patients who are requiring mechanical ventilation. But then I do a lot of research that has absolutely nothing to do with clinical medicine, just to know how people breathe.
Have you authored a textbook on the subject of ventilation?
Yes, I've authored a large textbook on mechanical ventilation that's called The Principles and Practice of Mechanical Ventilation.
So am I showing the cover of your textbook here on the camera? Is this the book you're referring to?
That is correct.
1,500 pages?
Correct, 1,500 pages, yeah.
Are you familiar with the Lancet, L-A-N-C-E-T, medical journal?
Yes, the Lancet is one of the top medical journals in the world.
And does the Lancet Medical Journal refer to this book as the Bible on mechanical ventilation?
Yes, it has called it that.
Have you authored other books also?
Yes, I am.
Roughly how many?
I think I've published 8 or 9 other books.
And all related to respiration or respiratory failure?
Correct. They're all on different aspects of the lungs.
Have you published articles and abstracts also?
Yes, I have.
Approximately how many of those?
I lose count, but I think I've published more than 750 probably, or something like that.
Have you published in the New England Journal of Medicine?
Yes, I've published several articles in the New England Journal of Medicine.
The Journal of the American Medical Association?
Yes, likewise.
Are those two of the most respected medical journals in the world?
They are for clinical work, yes.
Have you also held editor positions at medical journals?
Yes, I was editor-in-chief of the journal called the American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine. So that's the premier journal in the world for all lung disease. It's also the premier journal in the world for intensive care medicine. And it's the official journal of the American Thoracic Society.
Have you taught and lectured outside of Illinois and or Texas?
Yes.
Generally where?
I've lectured all around the world. I mean, I've lectured in more than 30 different countries around the world, and probably the vast majority of states within the United States.
Well, Minnesota is one of the states in the United States. How about Minnesota?
I've lectured in Minnesota. I've been in the Mayo Clinic several times as a lecturer.
Were you given an award from the Mayo Clinic?
Yes, I was given an award called the Balfour Lecturer in the Mayo Clinic, and they give it out to one doctor every 10 years. And it's only to one doctor. It doesn't matter what specialty, so it could be around neurosurgery, gynecology, whatever. They just pick one person every 10 years.
And was it for anything in particular that you were recognized by the Mayo Clinic?
No, just for my work in as a researcher in clinical medicine.
Have you also published in basic science journals, such as the Journal of Applied Physiology?
Yes, I've published a lot of work on basic science that wouldn't necessarily be directly related to medicine in the Journal of Applied Physiology.
The jurors may not be familiar with what physiology is as a science. Could you generally explain it?
Yeah. I mean, physiology is basically how the body works. You want to know the science of how it works. You want a deeper understanding of what are really the mechanisms that make the body does what it does.
Within the field of physiology, is there a particular focus or interest you have?
Yeah. I'm primarily interested in breathing in the bigger area. And so with breathing, that would mean how the brain regulates your breathing, how the brain sends signals down to the muscles that control your breathing, your diaphragm, your rib cage, and then how you expand your chest and how you overcome forces within your chest, like resistance within your chest and all the rest of it, to get air moving in and out of your lungs, and then the particular forces that you generate in terms of the pressures within your chest that will enable breathing to occur, with the ultimate purpose of getting oxygen in and getting rid of carbon dioxide.
And do you consider this a part of the study of medicine?
It's not quite as part of the study of medicine. It's really quite separate, because it's more the basic physiology. So it's more in the realm of math and physics, but then it's applied over, because to be a good doctor, you need to have a good knowledge of science, but the science part is really separate from the medical part, and it's to try and hone down on the science as best as possible.
How long have you been working in respiratory physiology?
Since 1981, so 40 years.
And what exactly drew you to the physiology of breathing?
I mean, because I was going into pulmonary, at that stage I knew, as already directed, I had spent 5 years doing lung disease, and I just wanted to really know how you breathe, and I wanted to come up with new knowledge, because everybody thought everybody knew everything of how to breathe, and I thought it would be fun to find a lot of new stuff.
So, doctor, do you know of others kind of in your field who have been studying respiratory physiology for 46 years?
No, I mean, I know an awful lot of them along the way, but I mean, I would know no more than a handful or less of people who are still doing physiology at the patient's bedside. No. After 46 years.
So, doctor, let's change subject and talk a little bit about your experience of work as serving as an expert. Have you served as an expert witness before?
Yes, I have.
What types of cases?
Practically all of them have been in medical malpractice. So I've done it for both the plaintiff, for the patient side, and I've done it for the defense, for the physician side.
Have you ever been involved in a criminal case before?
No, I've never been involved in a criminal case.
Have you testified in court before?
I've testified in court. I don't keep track of the numbers, but I suspect I've been in court about 50 times.
Would you tell the ladies and gentlemen if you're getting paid for your time in this case?
No, I am not getting paid.
And why is that?
Well, when I was asked to do the case, I thought I might have some knowledge that would be helpful to explain how Mr. Floyd died. And since I'd never done this type of work in this nature before, I decided I didn't wish to be paid for it.
So did you volunteer to the state of Minnesota, or did the state of Minnesota call you?
The state of Minnesota contacted me.
What were you asked to do, Dr. Tobin?
I was asked to review the medical records related to the case. These were medical records from Hennepin County. Then there were a number of interviews of people that were interviewed. I was given a long list of these, and primarily it was related to looking at a large number of different videos. But of course then the big part was that I needed to read on the scientific background of all the various aspects related to it.
So let's talk about your opinions with respect to this case. Have you formed an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty on the cause of Mr. Floyd's death?
Yes, I have.
Would you please tell the jury what that opinion or opinions are?
Yes, Mr. Floyd died from a low level of oxygen, and this caused damage to his brain that we see, and it also caused a PEA arrhythmia that caused his heart to stop.
And by PEA, you mean pulseless electrical activity?
Correct. It's a particular form of an abnormal beat of the heart, an arrhythmia, and a particular form of it.
Is this what some persons might refer to as asphyxia?
Yes, it has been called asphyxia. To me, it's not terribly helpful. It just, what we're really talking about is a low level of oxygen. Other people talk about hypoxia. That again is just a Latin term meaning a low level of oxygen. So all of this is just really other words for a phenomenon that is a low level of oxygen.
Have you formed an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to what the cause is or was for the low level of oxygen in Mr. Floyd?
Yes, I have.
Would you tell us what that is?
The cause of the low level of oxygen was shallow breathing. Small breaths, small tidal volumes, shallow breaths that weren't able to carry the air through his lungs down to the essential areas of the lungs that get oxygen into the blood and get rid of the carbon dioxide. That's the alveoli at the bottom of the lung.
Dr. Tobin, would using a short video that you prepared help you explain to the jurors how oxygen gets into the lungs and the body? How we take in oxygen?
Yep.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 950. Can you describe first what that is?
So here we're looking at the lungs inside a body, and we see here that you can see the windpipe up at the top, the trachea, and then that splits into the bronchial tubes. And also you can see the diaphragm down at the bottom. And when the diaphragm contracts, there will be air moving.
The jurors can't see it yet, so I'm just having you just identify.
Oh, I'm sorry, terribly sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, I'm going to offer it, Your Honor. All right. Exhibit 950.
950 is received.
Yeah. Please proceed. We'll display it so the jurors can see it.
Okay, so now we're looking, and you can see the contraction of the diaphragm. That's the kind of pink area down at the bottom. We see air going down through the windpipe and then proceeding down to the bronchial tubes. And then it was going to continue down the bronchial tubes until it will reach out to the air sacs, which will be the alveoli. And now we're seeing that we're moving down here, and these are like the grape-like structures down at the bottom, and this is where all the action occurs. The oxygen goes across those air sacs, and also the CO2 goes across them, then it's expelled back out. So that's everything in a very rapid video.
So then what happened in the case of Mr. Floyd that relates to the shallow breathing that resulted in his low oxygen?
So there are a number of forces that led to that the size of his breath became so small. And so there are a series of forces higher up that are leading to that. And the main forces that are going to lead to the shallow breath are going to be that he's turned prone on the street, that he has the handcuffs in place combined with the street, and then that he has a knee on his neck, and then that he has a knee on his back and on his side. All of these four forces are ultimately going to result in the low tidal volume, which gives you the shallow breaths that we saw here. And so the air will not be able to reach those air sacs we just saw in the video, where the oxygen is exchanged and the carbon dioxide is removed.
Doctor, is there a concept that in the respiratory medicine field known as dead space?
Yes, there is.
How does that relate to Mr. Floyd?
So if you think of the video back all the way until you saw those clusters of grapes, where you saw the blood vessels surrounding the alveoli, everything up to there is dead space. So as you're breathing in, you breathe in through your nose, your mouth goes down through your windpipe, down through the bronchial tubes, radiating out until it reaches the air sacs. Up till you get to the air sacs, it's all dead space. Because the reason we call it is because no oxygen can get across those bronchial tubes. No carbon dioxide can get across it. The oxygen and the carbon dioxide, the only place that gets across is those little grape-like structures. So everything in the lungs before that is dead space.
So you mentioned several reasons for Mr. Floyd